It is not a hidden fact that Angry Birds dominated the 2010s and set the standard for the mobile gaming industry. So looking at Angry Birds nowadays, you would see that there's been a lot of things changed, some for the better and a lot more for the worst. And with all stories, it starts at the start with the initial design of Angry Birds. So when talking about the initial design of Angry Birds, we have to go all the way back to 2009 when Jaco Lieslob, the sole designer at Rovio, faced a very tough challenge: creating a game with limited resources and a very tight budget. Inspired by his passion for drawing animals, he designed a group of birds with distinct beaks, rounded shapes, and very angry eyebrows. Envision a flock of these birds that he created destroying things. But the initial game concept was simple, involving birds attacking color-coded structures without any clear launching mechanism. Jaco continued with this concept and went through a couple of iterations of design of these birds, which will slowly come to be known as our typical flock of Angry Birds. But something essential came up. Testing revealed that players were confused, and this led Laszlo to invent the iconic slingshot for launching the bird. Though initially deemed too obvious to play as, the game needed some type of enemy and some type of objective. So Laszlo drew a green pig that was quite a contrast to the red main bird that he drew in the original thing. After months of work, constantly going back and forth through development, fixing issues, the game was finally released to app stores. But there was a slight issue. The game struggled for 3 months until Apple featured it on the App Store, causing it to go insanely viral. The game grew in popularity and it achieved millions of downloads, eventually reaching 2 billion downloads. This was an astronomical feat for such a small game studio at the time, which set ripples through the whole industry. With this type of success, it was no doubt that a sequel would be made, and the sequel was made, and it was named Angry Birds Halloween, more popularly and widely known Angry Birds Season. This sequel traced true to form and kept all the general aesthetics and a lot of the main characteristics of the original, and adding exactly what you need in a sequel or addition to the franchise by adding new levels, better music, cleaning up some of the graphics, and just staying true to quality. This will not be seen in the future ventures of Rovio to the Angry Birds franchise. We're gonna have to skip a whole 4 years into the future to go to the next most graphically changed era of Angry Birds characters, where we're gonna have to skip to 2014 and the release of Angry Birds Epic. With this game, we saw a big reimagination of Angry Birds Flock, and graphically we can see everything looks a lot more aesthetically pleasing, a lot more up with the times, and just a lot more effort and money has obviously been put into it, and we've come to the conclusion of a lot more contrasty, shaded, and just a better color palette for each of the characters in this game, where we could see the graphical boost in quality in this game compared to the original version. As man once told me that all good things must come to an end, and they did for Angry Birds. The measly 2 years after the release of Angry Birds Epic, the golden era of Angry Birds, we skipped to 2016, where after the release of Angry Birds 2, we get the Angry Birds movie, and this was a big punch. A studio that once failed to make ends meet. Sketches to the big screen, this was insane for everybody involved in the creation of Angry Birds back in 2009. But with this, we saw the big change in culture after this movie released. It became significantly more successful than any of the other Angry Birds games. Even after the 2 billion installs from the original game, the money from the Angry Birds movie shifted it all, and Rovio saw money signs in their eyes. For the release of the Angry Birds movie back in 2016, they believed that they had to unify the Angry Birds franchise to make all graphics look the same, instead of having the big screen looking like 3D models, the video games looking like 2D models, the series look having a different graphic. They felt like they had to universally have one graphic design that just summarized what Angry Birds was being presented to the world. This was their fatal flaw. It was not a hidden fact that the Angry Birds video games were on steady decline, and they settled with movie graphics, which normally wouldn't be a difference if they started out roughly with 3D models, with the Angry Birds with arms and legs and looking like whatever this is. But they changed the whole graphics of the video games to the movies graphics to match up. And with the remaining fan base they had with the games, they didn't like it, and this made the video games crash even more.
The graphics wouldn't impact the game performance to the audience.
And I'm gonna tell you why. In game is needed for the game to improve and grow bigger. You can't stick with the same thing, no updates, and expect the game to eventually get better over time. But the way they did it was not the right way. But when you're updating a game and adding to a game, you want to find out what's not working and change that, right? Angry Birds did the opposite, changed what was working and ruined it completely, and they were doing nothing right. Everything was just going wrong. Only what Rovio was doing graphically to the games, it was also the surroundings of the game. Angry Birds, instead of making strides for the future of the industry, they started, let's say, adapting more of the mobile franchise gaming environment that was slowly shifting from quality over microtransactions played game, which was evident. Also adding on to the piles of players that were just upset and didn't want to be a part of this. And fresh off the release of the Angry Birds movie, they released their next big game, Angry Birds Evolution, which I'm not going to talk about that because that was no. It was publicly released that Angry Birds Evolution made roughly $300 million. Development estimated to make, from my source, $3 to $5 million to develop the game, which is a turnover of $25 million. It's great, and I want some of that. Now let's take a look at the Angry Birds movie, which the budget was $73 million and a box office of $352.3 million, which is a way bigger turnover point than anything from any of the games that ever even came close to. 350 million has not including any of the merchandise has been sold, such as t-shirts, toys, hellos, I don't know, everything that has ever to do with that. That doesn't include that. So think, let's add roughly 50 million on top of that. So $400 million from one movie, one piece of content. A big wad of cash looks a lot more pleasing to stockholders than a couple of low income making games, which as a company, a public company such as Rovio, they want a bigger fish. Want to please all stockholders, which they're a public company and they release all this stuff so they can get more investment to make more money, and it's just a cycle of just trying to make more money. Rovio is a public company that anybody can look at any of their revenue coming in. I think I'm going to leave a link below. You can look from 2017 all the way up to 2023 of any of their revenue reports. Seeing the serious amount of cash that other companies were making from microtransactions inside of their games, Rovio decided to imply this into some of their other existing games and into their future games. And Angry Birds 2 becoming one of the most monetizable game that they've made, making still to this day reported 2023 making 23 million euros, which is $24.8 million. So a big company just wanted to make more money. What has actually changed? This is a very common question that a lot of people has, and it's a tragic tale of how a small passion project turned big conglomerate, turns money hungry and wants what's best for their pockets more than what's best for the audience that created what they have. And with the release of the third movie, Angry Birds movie, the trilogy, there seems like there's no sign soon that Angry Birds is not going to stop with their motives of trying to accumulate as much money as possible, and by bringing down their games, lessen the quality, and just overall making the games a lot worse than they were a couple of years ago. Making a lot of terrible decision making, but making a couple good ones. Angry Birds Reloaded, back to script, keep that up, we need that more, but generally falling very short of a lot of games and not bringing back their classic games. We didn't even talk about them completely removing all the games, even the original, everything was scrapped. If you want to see a video where I talk about that in full, go on screen now or click top right, and I'll see you in the next one.